throw down. Heartbeats racing, can't slow down. Feel the tension, feel the heat. Emotions hitting on repeat. Wrestling win with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout.
Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome back to Wrestling with Emotions, Episode 5. We're going to do an early one this week. I'll talk about why in just a moment. So this is going to be coming out, what is it? Tonight is Thursday. I'm probably going to push it out either later tonight, early tomorrow. So you'll miss any type of recapping regarding SmackDown and what happens tomorrow night. Maybe we'll talk about it, I'll preview just a little bit. But I am heading up to New York City. I am going out to Long Island for the big event, New York Autograph Signing Expo, or whatever you want to call it. Super excited. I haven't gone to this previously. I've ordered items through their eBay website previously and have had a good experience working with them. But if you're not familiar with Big Event EXS, it stands for Entertainment and Sports Expo. For the most part, primarily the majority of the folks that are going to be there this Saturday at the Suffolk Credit Union Arena on Long Island, March 15th. It's Saturday. The majority of the folks that are going to be there are going to be wrestlers. There's some UFC fighters. I think a couple of former football players. But either way, I'm going up there. I'm going to meet Bret Hart, Lita, and there's a few other folks on the list. Good Lord. Mercedes Moné will be there. AJ Lee, I have a ticket to get something signed with her. And then there'll be a number of other individuals, Ric Flair. It seems to be that this is becoming larger and larger every year, which is exciting. And like I said, I've never been to it, but as soon as they announced that Bret Hart was going to be there, it was something that I didn't want to miss. And there still looks like they're adding folks every day. But if you're interested, or if you hear this early, again, it's Saturday, March 15th, Suffolk Credit Union Arena in Brentwood, New York. Bret Hart, AJ Mendez, Mercedes Moné, Lola Vice, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Mandy Sachs, Mandy Rose, formerly Mandy Rose, and a number of other individuals. The Great Khali, Titus O'Neil, it looks like, will be there as well. So it should be a fun day. If you get early access tickets, you can get in, I believe, at 9:30. But it should be a great time. So that's where I'm headed on Saturday. So I'm not going to be able to do, or might not have the time to put together a Sunday show. So I wanted to kind of reach out and pop this one out early and kind of talk through Revolution and a little bit of Dynamite, and maybe talk a little bit of Monday Night Raw. So I'm going to try to go quickly, so it's not like an amazingly long episode, but a lot happening already this week. And as I mentioned already, we still have SmackDown left for the rest of the week. Again, if you've listened or watched or listened before, number one, you can find us on YouTube, Wrestling with Emotions. Again, I say this all the time, no video just yet, but we are in the process of getting that up and running. I need a better camera, number one, and I want to clean up the background and show off some of the stuff that I've been collecting for a long time, because I do collect a lot of different items, both wrestling and some pop culture stuff. So looking to set up a good background so you guys have a good understanding of what that looks like. And then, of course, as we expand the YouTube aspect and channel, do some room tours, do some reviews, etc. So that is kind of what we're looking at there. So I'm going to start off today. I'm going to talk about Revolution. I'm going to skip all of the pre-show action. I think I mentioned only one match last week when I was doing the preview. There's turned out to be 3 or 4. I'm going to skip them because honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, the Chris Jericho stuff, I mean, a lot of this is kind of tired, deserved to be on the pre-show. No offense. But I'm excited about everything that took place on the show. I know a lot of people have obviously reviewed this pay-per-view already this week, so I'm late to the game. But just like a lot of the opinions out there, I feel from a match order standpoint, they could have probably done a little bit of a better job in terms of what went on, or what went on last for the main event. So kicking things off right away, we had the grudge match between MJF and Hangman Adam Page. To me, this was a terrific match. You had a lot of classic heel heat from MJF, the eye pokes, the crotch thrust to the face of Hangman, which was ridiculous. Um, but overall, a really solid match that ended up with Hangman taking the win. And I think I'll try to weave in some of the stuff that happened this week because a lot of it obviously will cross over. So this week, following that match, Hangman is on a path. Who knows who he'll face next? Will it be another match with MJF? Dynasty is just a month away as well, so we're still looking for whoever his opponent will be next. MJF, of course, is greeted in the ring by MVP. Denies to kind of join the Hurt Syndicate, so who knows where that kind of goes. It felt in a sense, and because they do have an encounter towards the end of the show, MJF and Hangman, in the back. Great promo and segment between those two guys. Um, so who knows? It might end up that they face off again, but it felt as if maybe the MJF is heading in another direction. Hangman could be as well. Back to Revolution, we have the TBS Championship match going on next. You have Momo Watatambe challenging the CEO Mercedes Moné, who will also be at Big Event EXS this Saturday. During this match, Nigel joins the fun to broadcast, and this ended up being a pretty solid match. Billy Starks gazed on from the rafters or from a press box taking notes. So obviously, her and Mercedes are lined up at some point. I believe that was also the information or the story angle that came out of Monday night or Wednesday night's show, that we will see them obviously facing off at some particular point in the near future. Um, from there, so in this match, obviously Mercedes retains. There were a couple of spots where I was like, wow. Mercedes, I think, Sasha Banks, Mercedes, whatever. She does a great, I think she's terrific in the ring. She always performs very well. She can kind of rise to the occasion no matter who she's in there with. And not to say that Momo um, wasn't a great opponent for her. Obviously, they faced off previously. There's a history there. Um, but she always shows up. But man, she took a really, really stiff kick, it looked like, um, to the face. You could see that bruising on Wednesday night as well. And I don't think, I mean, probably they embellished a little bit with makeup, etc. But it did look really tough when she took that to the face. Of course, finished the match just fine. Hit the bank statement, or sorry, the Monet Maker after the statement. Um, and she retains her titles. And it looks like obviously like Billy Starks will be the next challenger. Billy Starks completely fine. Obviously, the women's Ring of Honor champion. But I would love to see a stronger opponent for her. I think I don't want to say that she's been protected because I don't think that's the case. I think she has had some really great matches. Um, obviously throughout her tenure as the TBS Women's Champion, but I think she needs a proper feud. Obviously, you contrast that in her direction with like the Tony Storm Mariah May angle. That literally at this particular point lasted over a year. I remember I met Mariah May at WrestleCon up in Philadelphia last year during WrestleMania, and I didn't ask this because I'm not a fucking mark. But all these people are, when are you going to turn on? When are you going to turn on Tony Storm? When are you going to turn on Tony Storm? And it's like she's number one. She's not going to fucking tell you the angle and when those stories are going to when those things are going to happen. But there was foreshadowing obviously back then. But they kicked that off on a year-long journey. So Mercedes needs an opponent or somebody like that. And it's not that AEW is short on women to challenge. I think, somebody like Jamie Hayter. Where's Britt Baker? I know they had the one match blowout It wasn't Britt's best match, obviously. She was also returning from a long hiatus, and has seemingly disappeared now. Where is she at? And then you have women like Willow Nightingale. Um, I just think there are a number of other women that would challenge, and I think that they could push. That would be exciting opponents, and just not foregone conclusions. Essentially, that Mercedes is going to take the win. So with that said, we move on to the AEW World Title number one contenders match at Swerve Strickland with Prince Nana in his corner versus Ricochet. These men know each other obviously extremely well over the years. This was another really great match. It had a few ups and downs. Um, Swerve obviously pushing Nana at one point. Nana heads to the back, comes back, steals the robe from Ricochet. They fight for the robe. They fight for the robe. Everyone's back into the ring, and then of course Swerve hits the big pressure and pins Ricochet for the win, and now he is the top contender for the AEW World Championship. We'll see him later in the show after a less than enthusiastic main event. Continuing on with another set of great matches, the next match we have was the AEW Continental Championship match. It's the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada versus the Hound of Hell's Brody King. Now, I talked about this in my preview, how um, it was kind of put together rather quickly in terms of the storytelling. I may have also missed, and I'll be honest, and if you're even listening, the two listeners who listen to this, I'm not, if I miss something, I miss something, because I know they probably did a little bit more of a build up. I don't watch every single episode of Collision. A lot of times I get the highlights. So there probably might have been something from a program standpoint that I did miss that set this stage for this match. And overall, I was excited about it in terms of just a one-on-one matchup. I think it's terrific what they've done in terms of pushing Brody King. I watched him, what was it, Wrestle Dream? I think it was Wrestle Dream a couple months ago when Kenny returned. My first New Japan Pro NJPW pay-per-view match that I ever watched. Stayed up to like 2 a.m. I thought he was awesome. I'm excited for him. I think he's obviously a great worker, terrific look. Obviously a terrific match against Okada, who's also a big man as well. But again, never kind of a doubt that Brody was going to fall in this match. So Okada retains the championship, and hopefully we're looking at a situation as we get closer to where we talk about the continental. I'm sorry, the international championship. Hopefully the merging of those two belts, and we'll get some type of rematch with Kenny and Okada. But moving on from there, to no fault of their own, but again, I feel like they just had to put a tag team match on the pay-per-view, and then you have your tag team champions, of course, the Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, with MVP in their corner, taking on the Outrunners, Truth Magnum, and Turbo Floyd. Overall, not a bad match. Probably, a little bit mid in terms of excitement build, storytelling, and everything else. I mean, obviously the Outrunners, a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a couple of months ago, were red hot, super super over, and it's not that they are right now, but it wasn't as if the AEW was ready to capitalize on that a couple of months ago and putting the belts on them then. So, foregone conclusion, the Hurt Syndicate end up taking this one. Um, who knows? You have Leo Rush and Action Andretti watching from the front row. Who gives a fuck? Just boring. I don't care about either one of those guys. I don't think anybody else does either. So if that's the next team that's up to face them, the tag team division just continues to be a snooze fest at the current state, which is a shame because it used to be probably one of the strengths of the company at one time. So we'll see what happens because eventually these guys will drop these titles. I cannot see either one of these guys not going into some type of singles run. Obviously, Bobby or Shelton taking that chance, especially a guy like Bobby Lashley. It's hard not to see him eventually getting into the singles picture and challenging for some of these championships. And then you have the match that everybody, for the most part, felt probably should have gone on last, especially with the curtains up and the lights down. The end credits at the very end of this match could have closed the pay-per-view off with a chef's kiss, as they say. It's the AEW Women's World Championship, the Hollywood ending match. Timeless Tony Storm's your champion, with Luther, the butler, in her corner versus the woman from hell, Mariah May. This match, from start to finish, was terrific. Now, let me say this really quickly, because for this particular match, and you'll see him again in the main event as well. But Jim Ross, joins commentary from the booth. Number one, let me say this: I grew up listening to Jim Ross. Jim Ross, the calls that he made in the '90s during the Attitude Era are burned in my mind for the rest of my life. Stone Cold, Stone Cold, Stone Cold, good God Almighty. Now, obviously he's an older dude. We all get old. Because just like I said that, I was probably 16, 17 during that particular time. 15, 16, 17. Now I'm 43. So I'm old as hell too. But good Lord, the steam that these broadcasts start to lose now that when JR joins commentary, and I know it's a feel-good moment. I've been there in person when the Oklahoma theme song hits for the school or whatever, and he pops out, and he joins commentary, so I get it's a nostalgic pop. But at the same time, if you're listening to these broadcasts, what is he truly adding? Especially when you have a four-man booth for some of these matches, that's difficult in itself. So it's just really tough to kind of follow along from a storytelling standpoint when he's just adding little quick anecdotes that really aren't really driving a lot. And you'll see that as well in the finale, main event as well. So obviously, if you're already watching this, you know already Mariah May falls to Tony Storm. A lot of this is awesome chants. This is awesome chants. Both women gave it their best, and I will tell you this: some of the best matches that the women have had in AEW are continuously um, the hardcore matches. In my opinion, the one several pay-per-views back with Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale was awesome. The first one that really turned me on to the women's division here was Ty Conti, Anna Jay versus the Bunny and Penelope Ford. I thought that was on either a Dynamite or a Rampage, but just an awesome match. These women gave it their all. I mean, they're bleeding all over the place. They had a couple of cool spots where you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. Dipping their hands in glass. I thought I was watching Kickboxer. It was a very quick spot that didn't really truly amount to much, but it was a captivating image and pretty cool shot. And then of course Tony dumps the whole bucket full of glass on the ring. They have a couple, or inside the ring, and they have a couple of spots there. But the third match in the trilogy wraps up, and of course, like I mentioned, Tony Storm retains. She's your women's AEW World Heavyweight Champion, or World Champion, and she inevitably is on to the next. Fast forward to Wednesday night, she cuts a pretty cool promo, basically saying she's moving on to whatever challenge might be next. Women, throw your keys in the bowl. It's basically time for an orgy to decide who will be the next women's champion. And of course, Megan Bain pops out, hits her from behind, and apparently that will be the next challenger, the first person to rise to the occasion. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second when we go back to Dynamite, because I thought it was a little bit odd because she appears later in the show again in a different angle, and it's confusing. So the next match, if it couldn't get any better with Mariah May and Tony Storm, you've got the AEW International Championship match, the Alpha Takeshita versus the cleaner Kenny Omega. Obviously, Don Callis gets involved in a couple of different spots. Ultimately, this time finally doesn't affect the outcome. And like I hoped, predicted, and prayed for, Kenny Omega is now your international champion. And it's great to see. He was on Monday night. Oh, good Lord, I keep saying Monday night. He was on Wednesday night. Kicked things off. Looked great. Obviously, there's a new championship tournament to decide who will face him at Dynasty. Um, we'll see who that ends up being. There's a couple of wild cards still on the board to be decided, so it could be somebody from out of left field that pops up. You never know, but it would be kind of cool to see if it does come down to him and Orange Cassidy. I think that would be a great match. I think they would tear the house down, and have a really good one. This match overall, the both men did a really great job of telling a story. They used tables in different ways as well. Obviously, the previous match before that, there was a few table spots, um, with the Storm Zero through, the Hollywood ending table. So we had our fill of tables, and then all of a sudden we have some pulled out, but they were more so used as enhancements to Kenny's selling of his midsection issues. So hopefully, as we move forward, less and less talk about the diverticulitis and that being a part of all the matches and the storytelling. Now that he's a champion, hopefully it's just kind of back to business. A lot of really high flying, great action in this particular match as well. Um, Knee strikes, and then um, the Blue Thunder Bomb, Omega with a wild, uh, uh, I guess, power bomb off of the top rope with Takeshita in his grip. Um, the V trigger, one winged angel escape, but a pin with a crucifix to become the new AEW International Champion. Again, um, I hope they merge this title with the Continental Championship title, because it doesn't. I don't understand the Continental title at all. It just felt like a belt that they created just to put on Okada. Um, and it's confusing, the difference between the two. Another match that probably could have closed the show or been in a better spot besides the main event. We've got the steel cage match, the aerial assassin Will Ospreay versus the protostar Kyle Fletcher, again with Don Callis in his corner. Very, very cool visual to start this. Both men on top of the cage, standing corner to corner, looking at each other. An awesome aerial shot of both men above the cage. Another hard hitting, um, excellent match. You're totally utilizing the cage, also showing from an Osprey standpoint, having to change some of his offense with some of the limitations of the cage walls being in the move and being in the way of some of his typical moves. Um, Overall, just an amazing match between these two guys. Um, Again, a lot of blood in this one in particular, and then obviously there was interference, which is odd in a cage match. I say that, we'll talk a little bit about Monday Night Raw. But Mark Davis, of course, interjects, had no real true outcome on how this one finishes. So at the end of the day, does it matter? And why did he jump in? If they could have told the story without that entire piece, and we would have been fine. Um, a super, super nervous move. And I think, here's one of the things too. Maybe it's just a product of me just being old. Um, and because I try to think back. Let me take a swig of tea. I try to think back to when I was a kid, watching these matches. Obviously, I was around the first Hell in a Cell. Mick Foley, or not, that wasn't the first Hell in a Cell, that was Shawn Michaels. But the match between The Undertaker and Mankind, where Mankind flies off the cage through the table. As a kid, when I saw that, I was like, this is incredible. This is awesome. Still fearful. But now it's like, I'm terrified any move these guys make. I was scared to death when Cope came off the cage months ago. And then, of course, what ends up happening? He breaks his fucking leg. So, and I just happened to watch, um, what is it? The Inside Podcast? It's Chris Van Fleet, and he had Will Ospreay on earlier in the week. And they were, of course, talking about, scaling back some of the dangerous high spots. He's getting older, his body's breaking down, taking care of himself, etc., etc. And then you've got both of these dudes climbing 20 feet above the ring, and they hit a Spanish fly off the top of the fucking cage. It was incredible and incredibly scary. I was on the seat, I was on the edge of my seat, just hoping and praying. Number one, that no one's leg got caught in the. That's all I was thinking during this entire time. I hope no one's foot gets caught if they're going to do some kind of crazy move off of this. Because I was like, this is going to be disgusting if someone's leg just breaks because their foot got caught. Spanish Fly, it looked, obviously Fletcher looked, obviously it couldn't feel good no matter what, but it looks like obviously he protected himself. He landed extremely well. Osprey looked like he landed more so on his hip, which looked rugged. Hits the hidden blade, and then the Tiger Driver 91 scores the pin, wins the match, and cuts a promo after, I'll say after hours, online, talking again about how he wants to own the ball and be the next guy up. So he comes out again on Wednesday night, looking a little worse for wear, obviously in rough shape, cuts a promo again, basically reselling exactly what he said on Saturday, or, Sunday night. And we'll see where he goes next. Points to the All In sign for Arlington, Texas in July. So we'll see. That, like I said, he's selling injuries walking to the ring, but at the same time, it looked incredibly dangerous and painful coming off of that cage, and he did limp to the back. Excuse me. Immediately after the match, so I hope he's okay. But extremely dangerous. You just had and we'll talk about this too, because the next night you have the cage match in Madison Square Garden with CM Punk and Seth Rollins. I hope you like all these coughs, because I'm not editing the shit out because I'm lazy. And number two, I don't know how to do it. But an excellent match. You just had a cage match of all cage matches. Okay? And here we go. The main event. The AEW World Championship. You got Jon Moxley versus the Rated R Superstar. Cope. Can't stand it. JR's back, like I mentioned before, on the commentary team, bringing down the entire fucking commentary team. And again, big fan of historical JR. But man, just leave the guys who are out there in the mix. Shivani, Excalibur, Taz. They have great chemistry. They tell a story. It's fun. It's not, and here we go. Anyways, getting back to the match. It was something that honestly took me a long time to get into. And it's not like I dislike Cope. I'm not a Moxley fan. I think a lot of his stuff is extremely one-dimensional. So you really knew what you were going to get. And not that Cope at his age is not predictable at a certain extent. Both are great. Don't get me wrong, at telling a story. There were a lot of opportunities where they did a really great job. It's just that where this fell in the card, you had brought people up and down emotionally multiple times. And then you finish with one of the highest of highs in that cage match. You just had a Spanish Fly off the top of the fucking cage match, and now you're back to the same Moxley choking guys in the middle of the ring. And you can't even compare it. And then how many times are we gonna see sad fucking Wheeler Yuta come to the ring and have to make a decision on whether he's going to be a Death Rider or not? I mean, we played that fucking card how many times with Daniel Bryan, and then he continued to turn on him. And now, of course, on the heels of shaking Cope's hand and having a fallout, seemingly, with Mox, what was it, Saturday night on Collision? He's back in the ring, and without even with barely a hint of storytelling and hesitation, hits Cope with the Basaka knee and hands Mox the briefcase. Jay White enters the fray, knocks down Yuta. What is it called? The Switchblade? I think that's the move that he's got. The Blade Runner. Man, I love this guy. I love Jay White. I'm gonna say it. The look, the talk, the moves. He's got it all, man. They need to. He should be in the main event picture, or at least vying for some of these other titles. He is so smooth, and that the Blade Runner that he hits, I think, is one of the coolest moves. He's able to do it seem so smoothly on almost anybody from any position in any situation. But anyways, he comes in, hits Yuta with the Blade Runner, retrieves the briefcase, goes to smash it against Mox's head, but in turn he ducks, and then he accidentally hits Copeland with the briefcase. You would think in a normal match that this would probably yield a 3 count, but this does not. Cope somehow regains his positioning, spears Mox three times, goes for the cover, and then Christian Cage pulls pulls Cope out of the ring, cashes in his contract. So now you're thinking, this could be a turn that could be pretty cool. Now we've got a little bit of a change up, and I would not mind them putting the belt on Christian Cage. I think it would be awesome. But that is not to be, my friends, because the moment that he gets into the ring, it backfires completely. I thought there was a really cool spot where Christian is in the bulldog choke. Mox is obviously riding him deep, and Edge is on his back after being hit with the kill switch, and he just puts his hand on his chest, and the ref starts to count. I thought if he got a 3 count on that while he's being choked out, I thought that would have been a pretty sick finish. But of course, they don't do it that way. He passes out. They call the match. Mox retains, and we're on to the next. Just a fall flat type of match. It could have been, if anything, and here's the funny part too, because we're going to see it, I think, either next week or in 2 weeks. A rematch. It's going to be a street fight, but this match felt like it could have been a Dynamite main event, maybe closing out a night on Dynamite, especially the way it ends too. I mean, you do get the fun, feel good, go home feel when Mox goes, of course, into the crowd. He's going to exit through the stadium or the crowd, and then Swerve jumps from the stands, hits him with a double stomp, and we get the shot of him. Obviously, he won earlier in the night to be the next contender. So that is your match. Again, if they had put that match on a Dynamite closer, it would have been fine. It would have been it would have been a great show. But that could have easily and should have been probably second or third last match on, with either the cage match or the Hollywood ending match going on last. Small nitpick. Overall, I loved it. Again, they put on some of the best pay-per-views, or the best pay-per-views in the business. You always know you're going to get a great show. Never fails, and they didn't miss on this completely. I mean, it was a great show. So again, like I mentioned, I was excited, and I tweeted this as well. I think it sets the stage for what's to come. We already talked a little bit about Dynamite already, but now as we head into the week, Dynamite, a couple of times we hear from we start out with the trios match. I snoozed through this one, I'll be honest with you. The Ops, Samoa Joe, Shibata, Hook versus 3 jobbers. What are we talking about, and what are we doing? Foregone conclusion in a match that I don't know. I know you got a roster full and stacked with a bunch of guys that are terrific. Like Samoa Joe is a legend, and he's terrific. And both of those other guys, I mean, Shibata is amazing as well. Hook, meh. Still not as over as I think they think he is. Ricochet and Shibata have words after that backstage, blah, 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 blah. Let me just hit on some of the high points. We hear it's announced next week, as I just talked about, the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley will face off against Cope in a street fight for the title, obviously because he was not beat. And Swerve Strickland faces the winner of whoever this match will be at AEW Dynasty, which will be Sunday, April 6th, live on pay-per-view. Cameras catch up with Swerve backstage, and Cope interjects and says, hey, you might be facing me, essentially, blah, 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 blah. We'll see you. Good luck. Then there's obviously a little rundown with Jon Moxley. Who cares? Who cares? Hologram, Powerhouse Hobbs. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? We have the Dynamite the Dynasty International Championship Eliminator tournament match. They do great tournament matches and tournaments. We have the Beast Mortos versus Wildcard. It ended up being Speedball Mike Bailey. Mike Bailey wins. We talked about MJF. We talked about a few things. Penelope Ford versus Willow Nightingale. I thought this was another good match. I thought they both did a really great job. And here's the part that was confusing, and this is what I wanted to mention. As I mentioned earlier, after I talked about the Hollywood ending, Tony Storm comes out, cuts the promo on Wednesday night. Who's going to challenge me next? Blah, 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 blah. Megan Bain pops out, blindsides her. And then at the end of this match between Penelope Ford and Willow Nightingale, you have what's the best way to describe it? After the bell shenanigans again, where Penelope basically goes after Willow with a steel chair, one of the weakest fucking chair shots again. I mean, the Thunder Rosa one from 2 weeks ago is inexcusable. It's not even close to how bad. It's not even close to being compared to what we saw then, but another weak shot by Penelope. I mean, you hit this woman, dude. These women can take it. Chris Statlander, yawn, comes and sprints to the ring to save her old friend Willow. And then Megan Bain blindsides Willow and Chris with a double clothesline. Megan Bain is putting everybody on notice, says Excalibur. Why is she also involved in this picture? Now, I know she's been linked with Penelope Ford over the last several weeks since her debut. But now you've got Megan in the main title picture. Also in this picture from a tag team perspective, it's just confusing. Again, I think there are so many women on this roster that are so good and underutilized that they still continue to try to push Chris Statlander. I mean, give Willow give her a run. Give her a run. Sky Blue, she's got to be close to coming back as well. She deserves a little bit of run. Where's Julia Hart? Julia Hart will be there Saturday as well. Big event. Might try to get a figure signed. We're backstage with Mercedes Moné. I thought this was a funny segment. Man, I'll tell you what. Renee Paquette, just awesome. Underrated, I think. I think she's brought such a level of credibility. She does such a great job backstage. Obviously, she's experienced, but I think, from a backstage standpoint, there's nobody in the business who does it better than her. She can tell a story. She knows the business. She's super smart. She knows how to read a situation, and I think she does a terrific job. I talked about Ospreay coming in. He made it out at Sunday Alive. Points again, like I said, to the All in Texas banner. So we'll see who's next eventually down the line if he gets the title shot for All In, which more than likely that seems what that is headed towards. We got a quick segment backstage with Renee and Switchblade Jay White. They talk about obviously him hitting Cope with the briefcase. Was it on purpose? Was it not? He says no, of course it wasn't. And just basically goes into how obviously how Edge Cope has a shot at redemption next week. We talked about a little bit at the Adam Page. We talked about, and then you have your final match, the final of the excuse me. It's late. What the hell is it called? The main event. Let's call it that. You got Hechichiro. Fuck, I don't know. A guy from CMLL or AAA coming up, and of course going against Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy wins. Speedball Mike Bailey walks out after the match, smiling, pointing, and that closes out the show. Overall, I know I kind of breezed through this, but man, another solid episode of Dynamite, and it made me super, super excited about this roster, about where they're going, about the matches that could be projected. With the current card that they have, with the current roster that they have, I think they're super stacked. I think, a lot of times, and, a lot of fucking people online, like, excuse me, they'll point to like, oh, half empty places or ticket sales and how that's like an afterthought. Look, this is still a 5-6 year startup promotion. Yes, they have a tremendous amount of financial backing. They have a stacked roster. But hey, you look and you watch some of the early 90s to mid 90s, really anything from like 1991, 92 through 1997 when things started to really kick off with the Attitude Era. There were lean times in WWE as well. I mean, there's a reason why the Montreal Screwjob happened because Vince basically could not afford to keep Brett under the current contract that they had agreed to. There was financial issues for years, and there was low turnout to a lot of these shows. I mean, they had to move WrestleManias to smaller venues. People don't talk about that because a lot of the people who are talking shit online are fucking dumb, and they're just watching Wrestle Talk and or WrestleLamia and getting their information around um, ticket sales, attendance, and all that bullshit that if you're actually watching these shows and the buy rates and if you even give a shit about that, this is an amazing, incredible wrestling promotion with a lot of great talent putting on tremendous matches and great shows. And I think the sooner they realize that they're not WWE or competing with WWE because it's a totally different style that they're presenting from a television standpoint, that I think it's going to suit them so much better. But I mean, just look at this roster. I'm just looking at it right now. And a lot of these guys haven't been used in the longest of times. But you've got guys still like Adam Cole. He's still riding, the the circuit now, coming back into his own, really kind of getting, settled with his injuries and kind of, you know, riding the Undisputed Kingdom and seeing how long that goes. Eventually, I'm sure there will be another singles run for Adam Cole. You've still got Hangman Adam Page, one of the most interesting dudes in the entire business, in my opinion. This scrolling through here a little bit long. I mean, I'm gonna skip some of these guys because I mean they're great, but I mean it's just like, come on. You still have, like I talked about, Brody King, Bryan Danielson. He's not completely retired. He's just not full time. He'll eventually pop back up, and I'm sure he'll be in All In. And I can't wait to see it. I'm sure it'll be Bryan Danielson, maybe versus Mox. Maybe Mox loses the championship before it even gets to All In, because that would be. I think I know. I don't think I want to see Will Ospreay obviously in the main event, but I don't think I want to see it against John Moxley. And I think the fans are tired of it as well. Guys like Buddy Matthews, Jericho, Christian Cage. I know these are some old heads, but these are still dudes that can go. I'm gonna skip some names that or whatever. You got Cope. He's still popping no matter what age he is. Danhausen hasn't been on TV. He's still on the roster page. Where the fuck is he at? Eddie Kingston will be back. He's training. He'll be back. You still got guys who haven't been on TV in a long time. Jack Perry, Jay White that I've already mentioned. Let's get him back on TV. Or let's get him back in the title picture again. Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada, Shibata. Keith Lee's still on this page as well. Killswitch, I think he's close to returning, actually. I think he's relatively close. And then with everything that's going on with the patriarchy, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. If you didn't see, it looks like there's some cracks in the foundation, which will be good because it should hopefully set the stage for Christian to kind of break free from that. Maybe he joins Cope. And we get one final run. So we'll see what that looks like. But there is a stacked roster of talent. The Bucks haven't even come back yet. MJF, obviously. Um, Orange Cassidy. I can't believe I saw some shit online about how terrible he is when I was watching I keep calling the finale, the main event last night on Wednesday night. It was last night. He is terrific. He is excellent. Samoa Joe, Swerve Strickland, amazing. You got guys like Ricochet, Shelton Benjamin, obviously a little bit older. Scorpio Sky hasn't been on TV in a long time. You have such a diverse blend of talent. Wardlow hasn't shown up in forever. Will Ospreay that I just talked about. But let's quickly talk about. Maybe I should do a whole episode on the women's division. I'm going to do a whole episode on the women's roster and who I want to see pushed to the top, because I'm just doing a quick scroll right now, and there is a lot of meat on the bone here that they need to kind of take advantage of and really flesh out some cool stories, especially as some of these folks I know are close or have limited dates left probably on their contracts that they got to do something with before they either resign or leave, just in case they do. Okay, really quickly, let's head over and talk a little bit Monday Night Raw action from March 10th on Netflix. Obviously, we are live from Madison Square Garden. It's Michael Cole and McAfee calling the action again. Um, let's get into it really quickly. I'm going to skip some of the shit that I just don't care about. Jey Uso, I mean, I know he's incredibly over. I know he's incredibly over. But after the entrance, what do you really got? And that's no that does sound that I'm sorry, that does sound incredibly disrespectful. He is a terrific performer, but he doesn't, after the entrance, what, it doesn't really grab me. It's different than um thinking about years ago, Daniel Bryan and the Yes Chants and the pop from the crowd, the involvement of the crowd is a totally different animal, I think, compared to this as well. I mean, obviously, I think both are huge and have their time and place right now. But once the bell rings, I mean, Daniel Bryan was Daniel Bryan. You know what I mean? One of the greatest ever. So it's not that he's bad. It's just that I can't get behind. I don't fall. And this is the problem with WWE for me. For some reason, I just can't get behind a lot of these guys. Um, because they're getting behind me. You know what I mean? But we've got Jey Uso against Grayson Waller. I think that's again going to be. I think he's going to face off against Austin Theory next week. Grayson Waller sucks. I mean, this guy, Austin Theory, I'm sure, I think people are just waiting for him to break away from him. The next thing, I turned it off. New Day versus LWO. No interest. I do like Chad Gable. I do like him. He pops up after the failed luchador tour that he was supposed to do. They just did one quick vignette about him going to a back alley and getting a fucking mask essentially from a guy. And then he pops back up on Monday Night Raw. I think they were supposed to have him at least wrestle in Mexico, but somehow I believe that fell through, and he's back already. Next match you have is Raquel Rodriguez with Liv Morgan and Dom versus Bayley. And this is for the number one contender spot for the women's intercontinental title. And it's probably the right move, I think. But Raquel wins. So she will now face Lila Vicaria in some form or fashion. And I'm looking at this. This is crazy. This is Monday Night Raw is 2.5 hours, basically, roughly every single night, every Monday. 2.5 hours. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 matches. 4 matches in 2.5 hours. What is that? What does that equal? I'm stupid at math, so I'm not even gonna fucking try it. But it's insanely low. Contrast that with a tight 2 hours for AEW, and I know they primarily focus on wrestling, so I completely get it. There were backstage segments, but you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you count the Max Caster open challenge. Yeah, you have to. 5, 6, 7, at least 7 matches. 3 more matches in less than 30 minutes or less than the Monday Night Raw show. But that's fine. There are so many commercials on these things. That is crazy. You can take breaks no matter what you're doing and come back and watch Monday Night Raw. because it is so spread out because of all the airtime for commercials. It's crazy. We're probably looking at like an hour and a half program if you condensed all the commercials and bullshit. But anyways, the highlight of the night and what everybody's talking about, and I talked about this, I think last week when I talked about how the cage match was going to be on Monday night, and I knew Roman Reigns would come back during this call. So it's Seth Rollins and CM Punk. It says, if you're reading Yahoo Entertainment, an exceptional and brutal steel cage match tonight. I would not use brutal as a describer for this particular match. I thought there were a lot of good spots. I thought they told a story. But if you were to compare that to the night before on Sunday night, the Will Ospreay Kyle Fletcher match, it is night and day. It's night and day. Granted, CM Punk is an older man at this particular point. He's not going to be doing crazy wild shit like the dives and stuff off the top of the cage, and understandably so. They had a couple of cool spots on top of the cage, fighting back and forth, etc., etc. My problem with this match, and my problem with a lot of WWE matches or main events, and I think AEW falls into this trap a lot of times as well, is the amount of false finishes used in a match. I'd love to know how many false finishes in the steel. Just listen to the typing, please. Let's go to Reddit. This is where you can find really great opinions. Jesus, what a cesspool. I'm looking for a number. I can see a number in terms of like the amount of GTSs that were hit. You can never use the GTS again on Seth Rollins. You can never have it in a match where he hits it one time and wins it, because you hit him 3 times in a row and he's still kicked out. You hit him 3 times in a row with the GTS, the finishing move for CM Punk, and he's still kicked out. Seth Rollins hits CM Punk with the GTS, still kicks out. I believe there's a pedigree, still kicks out. Multiple, worst finisher in all of professional wrestling, curb stomps, still kicks out. But how does the match end? For some reason, the door lingers open at the very end of the match. Never seen it. Never seen it. I mean, I've seen it in the 80s and 90s when you had the big blue, where they would call for the door, it would open. And I think I've seen someone get pulled out of it before in the 90s. I would have to really have a jog my memory. But long story short, Roman Reigns pulls Seth Rollins out. Seth Rollins wins the match. And then Rollins then, proceeds to get destroyed on the outside floor. And then we think we're done. He's already destroyed him. And then Roman looks to the ring, and who's in the ring but Paul Heyman, the wise man, comforting and consoling CM Punk in the center of the ring, leads to a beatdown in the center of the ring. And who knows where this goes from here. I mean, I think we do know where it goes from there. I'm sorry. But we still have that favor lingering from War Games with CM Punk for his assist in the match with Roman and the Bloodline. And then, of course, now we're gearing up probably towards a 3-way battle. Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins. So a little bit of predictability. Great to see Roman back on television after 5 weeks of being off the shelf, after he was basically stomped out of the Royal Rumble. So glad to see him back. I think where we go from here will be exciting, at least. And then, of course, some of the next week we get John Cena. I believe it's in Brussels. Going through, is it? I think they're live from Brussels, so he'll be there. Cody will be there, so we'll probably finally get a little bit of momentum, and a little bit of build for WrestleMania and their match. because right now it's just Cody cutting empty ring promos on John Cena and The Rock. So we'll see. Overall, a pretty decent or average Monday Night Raw. The best match obviously was the finale. It doesn't hold a candle to the night before for the pay-per-view. But good to see at least them putting a pretty big match on TV, because it sets the stage obviously for what's to come. So what's to come for us? As I mentioned, I'm not going to have a show, or at least cover what happens on Friday. And I've got a couple of ideas for what I'm going to talk about in a few coming up shows. Maybe a couple of bonus episodes, release a few throughout the week. I definitely, like I said, I want to talk about the women's roster, where I would love to see it go. I mean, there are so many terrific talents on this women's side that are over, that just need a little bit more time, I think. So we'll talk through that, and then hopefully we'll recap the Saturday that was. Big event EXS, New York. But thanks for tuning in. Again, check us out on YouTube. We are on Twitter as well. And I do appreciate you guys listening. Tell your friends. And again, I appreciate you listening. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you next week.
Out in the ring where we throw down, heartbeats racing, can't slow down. Feel the tension, feel the heat, emotions hitting on repeat. Wrestling win with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout and bodies clash. In this world, emotions crash. Tangled up in thoughts we spin. In the chaos we begin. Finding strength that's deep inside. Facing fears we cannot hide. Wrestling win with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout and bodies clash. In this world, emotions crash. Every grapple, every hold tells a story to be told. Raw and real and full of fire, pushing through the darkest mire. Wrestling with our inner fight. In the spotlight every night. Voices shout and bodies clash. In this world, emotions crash.